The survival of the human race has depended on our ability to raise our young and teach them to be independent in the world. But in the 21st century, is it this simple? Can we give birth, feed and clothe them, and then hope for the best? Or do we need to know more? Today on the show, we will speak to parents, experts and a legal advisor to learn all we need to know about raising children in Australia. Hi, I'm Sally Ann and I'm a clinical psychologist, a wife and a mother of 4 who is constantly in awe of the strength people have in their lives, and I love to learn new things every day. So today and in the following weeks, we're going to meet some amazing people who will inspire us, teach us lessons about ourselves and others, and help us to see the silver linings in our own lives. And as a mum myself, I'm really looking forward to this show. But before we meet our first guests, I'd like to show you what it's like to live in a house with 6 children.
Can I sing, Palace? Mama's here. It's right me sing.
That's probably better, because if it was just 1 or 2 children, you might
Lose focus.
have lots of spare time, probably argue too much.
This looks like one big Brody bunch. Then number 1, he's been a fairly easygoing child. Adam's my second son.
Stubborn.
He's a little bit more stubborn, but he had an older brother to learn to be stubborn against. Jacob, my 3rd boy. Daniel's the 4th boy. Caleb's my little 9-year-old. And Rachel's number 6. A little bit feisty at times, but she needs to be to keep up against those brothers. I think every time I've had a new baby and bringing it home, in my head it's quite stressful, because you still got to focus on the ones you have, but remember the new one you're bringing home, and just how am I going to do it. I think when we have dinner and everybody's home at night, I quite like that, because this is our family. This is what, from our relationship, this is what we've produced. It does get stressful. Yeah. Just I think keeping up with each of the ages, because I go from adult 21 down to 5-year-old, and each child needs that time with you. So I think at times I sort of go through the day with each child, what they're up to in their stage, how I need to help, or you just spend time. I don't know, I feel I need to spend time with each of that child, because I'm still parenting the 21-year-old.
Of course.
So.
Best thing they'll ever do.
Interesting, fun, give it a go.
So firstly, we welcome Jane to the show. Thanks for coming, and thanks for letting us meet all of your family. And for those of you who were counting heads, the eldest son was away at a friend's house. So Jane, what are some of the biggest challenges? Your children range from 5 to 21. Tell us some of the biggest challenges about parenting those ages.
I think the biggest challenge for me personally as a parent is being involved and knowing what each of them are doing, and being a parent to each of them, whether it's the oldest, the middle or the youngest.
Because I imagine that would be quite difficult with, there's the way that you talk to a 5-year-old and then the way that you have to speak to a 21-year-old. Is it a challenge for you to work that through?
It becomes part of your everyday life. You don't just get confronted with an older child, and they grow with you. So the friendship and the parenting changes at a certain stage. So you're more of a friend, confidant, rather than a parent saying yes and no.
All right. And now we're going to add Karen to the conversation here. So Karen, you're a parent with a toddler and a preschooler. So what are some of the challenging things for you as a parent?
I think quite similarly to what the two of you would have experienced, it's just really finding the balance between the juggling act of being a parent to children of numerous ages, also being fulfilling your household needs, your own needs, your family needs and external needs as well.
Because that's the challenge, isn't it? There's lots of differences from the time when our parents had children to now in terms of the finances. I've read somewhere that the incredible costs it costs us to have children, to raise children. So, and I know that I understand that you two work at least part-time. Tell us what that juggle's like, working and having children.
I returned to work when my youngest was about 10 months, which seems young to some, but I really feel like it makes me a better parent having that outlet as well, to having 2 days where my focus is on something else other than just the children. It just fulfills something more in me that makes me a better parent than to them.
Actually, that's interesting that you say that, Karen, because one of the things I know that I think every parent struggles with is the return to work question, and the grief that we catch from other people that judge us or whatever. How did you manage that? Did you have to think about it a lot or talk to people, or did you just decide what was best for you?
I think I decided what was best for me. I actually finished one job partway through my maternity leave, and then thought, well, financially it really wasn't an option to stay at home full time, but also it was something that I wanted to do for myself as well, which does sound a bit selfish, but as I said, I think it really makes me a much more well-rounded parent and gives me that little bit of respite. Then I can invest the other days of the week in much more time with the children. So it was a good decision for our family.
Yeah. What would you think about that? Do you think, or have you heard any feedback from people about whether it is selfish for us to want to put ourselves first a little bit and do things for ourselves? Do you think that's a good message for parents or not?
I think it is a good message for parents. I think we do need a bit of time out from our children. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of parenting. I'm lucky in the fact I didn't need to use childcare. I borrowed my husband's time. So, and again, I can work on weekends when he's available. So we worked it out that way. Plus I also have good family backup.
So, and speaking of, family and home life, I imagine that the juggle for both of you really would be challenging, knowing where all the children are, who's looking after them, where they have to be, when they have to be there. Is that a challenge, or are there other challenges that you have in the households?
That would probably be my main challenge, just knowing different times of school finishing, secondary to primary, who's picking up.
Mine's not quite so bad because the small one at 15 months just comes along for the ride wherever we go. Okay. The older one has your set kinder time, so that's not so hard for me to juggle at the moment.
Yeah.
And then I have help from my in-laws on the days that I'm at work to pick up the older one from kinder, and he has a sleepover once a week at their house.
Oh, lovely.
So I think that's really, really enriched their grandparenting role to have that extra time with him and enhanced his relationship with them as well.
So actually, speaking of sleep, and both of you can answer this as well, what is the sleep time like in your house? Now, in your house, I imagine there's lots of different times everywhere because everyone's of different ages, but I think that sleep in your age group is actually often a challenge. So talk us through that. What happens at night time in your house?
I've been quite fortunate in that both of my boys sleep quite well, but in terms of getting home from work, it could be 5:30 by the time both my husband and I get home from work those 2 days. So dinner usually doesn't happen until 6:30, so I know that that's getting late. Some children are in bed by 6:30. We're more likely 7:30 for the baby, or if it's dragging a bit, then he'll hop in the bath with the big one and both be in bed by about 8 o'clock.
So no struggles or anything, no fights and arguments?
No, dinner's our struggle.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. What about the sleep time for you?
My children don't go to bed.
Actually,
and that's a different issue.
Yeah, actually, I found that too. It was much easier for me when my children, because mine range from 19 to 25, it was much easier when they went to bed earlier, because at least then you can put your feet up and do what you need to do. But when they don't go to bed, it's actually a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even with mine going to bed, I think I find that because they're both small, they take up a lot of our time and attention. So once they do go to bed, you don't get that, oh, it's me time, it's, okay, we need to put the dishes away and need to organise kinder lunches for the next day and pack bags, and particularly the day that I'm working, make sure the childcare bag's packed and the kinder bag's packed and the kinder library books are in the bag and change of clothes, and they're never ending.
Well, that's true, and that's the thing about parenting, isn't it? That there's never a cut-off time. There's never a time where you can totally relax and do your own thing. talk to us about meal times, because I know I have a lot of clients out there that ask me constantly about meal times and how to manage it. What happens in your house?
We have a very, we've had a very challenging relationship with our eldest with mealtime. He is not at all motivated by food, he's motivated by play, and he's a man of action. So food is quite a distraction from what he would prefer to be doing, which is playing or interacting or talking. He finds that sitting down to the dinner table with myself and my husband is the chance to just ask all the questions that he has about dinosaurs or space or whatever the topic might be for the day. And it really is, feels like it's a constant battle reminding him to eat all the time. And that happens through breakfast and lunch and dinner.
And what about in your house?
Meal times, we generally eat around 6:30 at night, and I was always going to have a family and everyone ate the same food, but it doesn't happen. I've got two that are cheap to keep. They live on air. But we all sit down at the dinner table at night and eat. If someone's working late, they eat when they're ready.
Okay, and just to finish this off, because we've just talked about all the things that are challenging with parents, what would be the greatest rewards that you would each find about being parents?
I think it's just the big rewards are those happy little faces and the warm cuddles, and just knowing that this person just is so linked to you and wants to be with you. And I know that that will change as they grow, but at the moment when they're small, it's a real blessing to be able to have that lovely relationship.
Great. Look, thank you both so much for chatting to us. After the break, we're going to meet a parenting expert who will help us sort through some of the questions from parents.
Yeah, and I also think that we need to be really kind to ourselves as parents.
Sharon Witt is an educator and parenting expert who is the author of 12 books. So welcome to the show, Sharon. It's always great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Sally Ann.
That's all right. Now, you deal with a lot of parents in the work that you do. I'm just wondering, when they talk to you, what would you say would be their greatest concern?
That's a really big question. I think one of the biggest concerns that parents tend to have is, am I going to stuff up my child's life? You know, we're often very hard on ourselves with the little mistakes that we make along the way, and I think that's probably one of parents' biggest concerns is, are they going to be okay? Am I raising a fairly great human being that's going to be okay in life?
And look, it's actually something that I often talk to parents about as well, because I think, and you guys can butt in whenever you feel like it, but I think that we all wonder, are we going to do the right thing, and you know, how do we go about that?
Yeah. And there's just so much out there now. There's so much noise in our heads and so much advice from so many different places that we can often just wonder if we're doing this parenting thing okay.
One of the things I was going to ask Sharon, but I actually won't now, I think, was about the different parenting styles. You know, we have the helicopter parents and the lawnmower parents and tiger mums and lots of different styles. But I guess, you know, one of the things that, you know, I'm wondering is there one right way?
Yeah, and I also think that we need to be really kind to ourselves as parents, because on any given day we are doing the very best job that we can. And you know, you've got 6 children and 2 children, and I think we need to remind ourselves that we're doing a great job and that it is one of the biggest and hardest jobs in the world. And it is 24/7. It doesn't stop, even when your children are 30, 40 years old. You know, my parents are still worrying about me, you know.
And my mother's actually here tonight just making sure that I look okay and that I sound okay. Now, in the break, we were talking about, you know, nurturing ourselves, and we were talking about, you had something to say about that? You were going to...
Yeah, well, I was saying that, you know, it's really important as parents that we do look after ourselves first and foremost. And there's that whole cliche about when you're in an aeroplane and if the aeroplane's going to crash, that the oxygen falls down, and that, you know, the instructions are always that you take the oxygen first and then offer it to your children. And that's really important, that we actually look after ourselves first and foremost so that we can actually nurture our children and have enough energy for them. And if we don't have the energy, then you know, it becomes more problematic. So it'd be great to find out what we do each other to look after ourselves.
Yes, yeah. So is there anything that you guys do to nurture yourselves? I think what you were saying before, Karen, is that you go to work. Are there other things that you do? And Jane?
I do like crafts. I do a bit of cake decorating and community work. I'm involved a little bit in the community and I enjoy that. So I do get a little bit of downtime.
I have lots of things that I'd like to do at the moment, Sally Ann, but it's a bit challenging. The small one is at 15 months is still a bit time consuming. I have great plans often, and I think you're very right in saying that we need to be kind to ourselves, because you set yourself goals for the day, and when you don't achieve them, it's very easy to put a negative spin on that and beat yourself up for it. But taking the positives out of the day and doing just those little things for yourself, even if it's to stop and get a coffee or have a phone conversation with a friend, to celebrate those and realise what that gives you back.
Yeah, as a psychologist, actually, I tell clients that it's really important to schedule a pleasure activity every day. You need to make sure that in a very busy day, because we all have busy days, to make sure that you actually schedule and plan something to do that day, whether it is just grab a coffee or, paint your nails or, whatever it might be. But we need to really look after ourselves and nurture ourselves, because I think that society's hard enough on us. There's all the breastfeeding issues about, do you breastfeed or not? We worry about those things. And another thing that parents worry about too, which may not be so relevant for you, Karen, but technology. How do we use it? How do we work that out? How do we manage technology? What do you do in your house, Jane?
Well, the older ones have their phones and their computers and their laptops, I should say. So they're pretty on them most of the time, or when they're needed. The younger ones, we sort of monitor no PlayStation during Monday to Friday, maybe on weekends, just pending. And the little one occasionally will go on an iPad.
Do you have any advice?
Well, it was interesting because I was actually at a conference yesterday, and a brand new dad of about a 3-week-old little boy was sort of amongst a few of us, and he said, we've decided our child won't be having any screen time for the first 3 years. And of course, myself and my colleague just had a little chuckle to ourselves. He said, I know what you're thinking, but that's how we're going to try. And I think it's really important that, that we monitor it and have it, we keep it, within the confines of a certain time frame, and just make sure that it's in moderation. I think all things are great, and we have some wonderful technology. We have iPads now and things that will entertain children, but we just need to make sure we do that in moderation and not use it as a babysitter all the time.
Exactly. Look, thank you so much for sharing your expert opinion on things, Sharon. And after the break, we're going to add a legal expert to our conversation, so stay tuned.
For example, leaving them in a very hot car for hours at a time.
Most parents are trying to do the very best for their children. They want to do the right things, but sometimes our gut instinct may not necessarily be compliant with the laws of the land. Here to help us clear up what we can and can't do, we welcome Lisa to the show. So Lisa Mendocino is a criminal lawyer from the law firm Slater & Gordon. She's been practicing criminal law for 14 years, providing legal advice and representing a broad range of clients in court proceedings. But as well as being a legal expert, Lisa is also a mum herself to 2 young children. So thank you so much for coming, Lisa.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sally Ann.
That's all right. Now, one of the things, I was on radio a couple of months ago, and they were talking about it being illegal to keep children in the car while you go and pay for petrol. Is this right? Is this what the law says?
No, the law doesn't say that at all. The law says that you can't leave your child unattended for an unreasonable amount of time. And I would have thought that going to the petrol station, leaving your kids in the car, making sure that the car door is locked, of course, it's not unreasonable.
Yeah. So what about then, when you think about the not leaving them for unreasonable amounts of time, what about letting our children walk to school? Because I guess we're not with them when we let them do that. Is that considered unreasonable?
I wouldn't have thought so, Sally Ann. I really think that the offence of leaving a child unattended is really intended for those parents who leave their children at home and go out at night, for example, and they're very young, or, for example, leaving them in a very hot car for hours at a time. I really think walking to school is not going to contravene the law.
Okay. So have any of you had any issues with having to, leave the children behind somewhere, or wondered whether something's not right? I know at different times I've actually run into the supermarket when my children were young, and actually I had a woman stand next to my car waiting for me, and my children, my oldest was actually 14, so 14, 12, 10 and 8, and she abused me when I got there. Have any of you had any issues with people getting upset with you, or?
I've certainly gotten upset if I've seen children in a hot car, and you know, I've actually stood there, not to be angry, but I've actually stood there and just waited, and just, you know, not made it obvious, but just to make sure someone's coming back within a reasonable time. So I think it comes down to common sense, doesn't it? And we would hope that everyone would have common sense. I know that's not always the case, but considering children walking to school, I think if you've actually gone through some procedures and what would happen if you felt like you were unsafe, or you felt like someone was following you, or a car came up, if you actually talk through some scenarios with the kids, I think, you know, it's important at age appropriate times to allow them to do things like that.
And actually, I think one of the differences these days is that we have technologies. We have mobile phones, so children walking to and from school probably have that. What about because you have a 5-year-old at
I have
school
a
at the
5-year-old
moment.
and one in grade 4, so 4 and grade 9 and 5. I would always, that they don't walk to school, because I like to know they get there, and I'm usually coming from the secondary school run, so it's a little bit time consuming. But the preppy hasn't yet walked home, but as they get a bit older, last year I had a grade 6 do it, and I allow them to walk home because I know they get home. Otherwise I search.
Yeah. So, look, another issue, I guess, with parenting is smacking. So we often, you know, wonder if is it illegal? I know it is in some countries. Is it illegal? What are the laws around smacking?
Well, smacking is technically speaking an assault. However, you can rely on having a lawful excuse, and the lawful excuse being that you're lawfully physically disciplining your child. The law basically says that, and the laws differ from state to state, but ultimately it's all about what's reasonable. And I think that these days, perhaps societal norms are such that smacking perhaps is not tolerated as much as it was in the past. And I've certainly experienced clients who have gotten into trouble for smacking their children in a very significant way in a shopping centre, and being arrested by the police and being charged with assault.
Wow. Because another thing, there's a show that's called The Slap, and that's where someone smacks someone else's child, so that's a contentious issue. The last really thing I wanted to ask while we've got you here is about the laws on drinking. Adolescent drinking. My children are a little bit older now, so I don't have to worry, but some of you will have children who are in that age group where you wonder, can they drink or not? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they can drink in the home. However, in Victoria, there is a law that says that you can't have other children drinking in your home, unless, of course, you have the consent of the parents of those children. So you have to be a bit careful there, and also there's an expectation in all states that parents are responsible in the way that they manage the drinking of alcohol in their home by underage.
And I understand one of the things that my children have all said is that with that it's written consent, and we have to worry about who's really signing those forms. Is that?
Well, no, it doesn't have to be written consent, but if you're the parent who ends up being investigated by the police, then you have to be the one to prove that in fact the consent was given. Okay. So, but it doesn't have to be written.
Okay, look, thank you so much, Lisa, for talking to us about all the legal issues. Thank you to the rest of you for taking the time to come and be part of the show. And thank you for watching the Sally Ann Show. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we want your feedback. So please contact us on our Facebook page or follow me on Twitter. Until next time, I'm Sally Ann.